There are creatures that have walked this earth far longer than we have. Predators that learn to hide in plain sight, to move through society undetected, to feed on us while we sleep and forget by morning. What you're about to hear is not fiction. These are actual accounts, documented in letters and journal entries, recovered from 5 individuals who encountered something ancient and hungry. Something that should not exist, but does. Something that has been feeding on humanity for centuries and shows no sign of stopping. Story inspired by classic Gothic horror, written by Margaret Blackwood. The first account comes from the diary of Dr. William Ashford, a physician practicing in London, 1923. His entries begin normally enough, documenting his daily rounds, his patients, the usual concerns of a medical man. But in October of that year, his writing changes, becomes urgent, frightened. The entry dated October 12th reads, "I have seen something that defies my medical training. A patient arrived at my surgery tonight, carried in by his brother. The man was pale beyond description, his skin like marble, cold to the touch. But he was alive, breathing, his heart beating. Yet when I examined his neck, I found 2 puncture wounds, perfectly circular, approximately 1 inch apart. The wounds were clean, almost surgical in precision. Around them, the skin had turned grey, as if the life had been drained from the tissue itself. Dr. Ashford treated the man with blood transfusions and rest. The patient survived but remained in a strange state. He slept during the day, deeply, almost comatose. At night, he became agitated, speaking of dreams, where a woman with pale skin and dark eyes stood over his bed, whispering promises. Dr. Ashford dismissed this as delirium until he arrived at his surgery one evening to find the patient gone. The window was open, 3 stories up, with no fire escape. On the patient's pillow was a note in handwriting that wasn't the patient's. It read, "He is mine now. As you will be, doctor. I have tasted your scent in his blood. I know where you live. I will come for you when the nights grow longer." Dr. Ashford's entries become increasingly paranoid after this. He writes of feeling watched, of seeing a figure standing across the street from his home at night, never moving, never approaching. He describes waking at 3 a.m. consistently, feeling a presence in his room, though he lives alone. His final entry, dated November 3rd, 1923, is barely legible, written in a shaking hand. "She came tonight. I saw her at my window, 3 stories up, standing on nothing, smiling at me through the glass. Her teeth were too long, too sharp. Her eyes reflected the lamplight like an animal's. I have locked every door and window, but I know it won't matter. She doesn't need doors. She doesn't need permission. She only needs the darkness, and the darkness is everywhere. If anyone finds this diary, know that I did not go willingly. Know that what killed me is still out there, still feeding, still smiling through windows at night, choosing her next victim." Dr. Ashford's body was found in his bedroom on November 4th. The official cause of death was listed as severe anemia and heart failure, but the police report, which was buried in archives and only recently discovered, notes several disturbing details. Dr. Ashford's blood volume was estimated at less than half of what should have been in his body. There were no wounds to explain the blood loss. Every door and window in his apartment was still locked from the inside. And on the outside of his 3rd-story bedroom window, there were handprints in the frost. Small hands, a woman's hands, pressed against the glass as if someone had been standing there 3 stories up, looking in. The second account is a series of letters written by Elizabeth Brennan to her sister Margaret in 1867. Elizabeth had recently married and moved to a remote estate in the Scottish Highlands with her husband, Lord Thomas Brennan. Her early letters are full of excitement about her new home, the beautiful countryside, the ancient castle that would be her residence. But by her third letter, the tone shifts dramatically. She writes, "Dearest Margaret, I must confess a growing unease about this place. Thomas insists we keep the servants to a minimum, saying he values our privacy. But I find myself alone in this vast castle for hours, sometimes days, while he attends to business I don't understand. He sleeps during the day and is most active at night. He claims it's the nature of his work, managing estates that require evening inspections. But Margaret, I've noticed things about my husband that disturb me deeply." Elizabeth's letters detail her husband's strange behaviors. He never eats in her presence. His skin is always cold, even near the fire. He has no reflection in mirrors, which she discovered by accident when trying to show him a new dress. When she mentioned this, Thomas laughed it off as a trick of the light, but Elizabeth knows what she saw, or rather, didn't see. She writes, "I stood before the mirror, and beside me stood empty space where Thomas should have been. I could feel him there, his hand on my shoulder, his breath on my neck, but the mirror showed only me, alone. Margaret, I am frightened. What manner of man casts no reflection?" Elizabeth's letters become more desperate. She describes waking with marks on her neck, feeling weak and dizzy, finding her nightgown stained with blood she cannot account for. She writes of trying to leave, but Thomas always stops her, his eyes compelling her to stay, his voice soothing her fears even as her body grows weaker. Her final letter, dated March 15, 1867, is the most chilling. "Margaret, if you receive this letter, do not come for me. It is too late. I understand now what Thomas is, what he's always been. He didn't marry me for love or companionship. He married me for sustenance. I am his food source, carefully maintained in this remote castle where no one can hear me scream. I've tried to flee, but I'm too weak now. And God help me, Margaret. Part of me doesn't want to leave. When he feeds, there's a pleasure in it, a dark ecstasy that's becoming addictive. I think that's the worst part. Not that he's killing me slowly, but that I'm beginning to crave it, beginning to offer myself willingly. I don't know how much longer I can maintain my own will. If I transform into what he is, if I lose my humanity completely, I beg you to do what must be done. A stake through the heart, decapitation, fire. Do not let me become a monster like my husband." Elizabeth's letters stopped after that. Margaret travelled to Scotland to find her sister, but the castle was abandoned. Local villagers claimed Lord Thomas Brennan had left suddenly, taking his wife with him. No one knew where they'd gone. But over the next decade, there were reports from across Europe of a pale couple, aristocratic and beautiful, who moved from city to city, never staying long. And in each city they visited, there were reports of unexplained deaths. People found in their beds drained of blood, with marks on their necks. The couple was never caught, never even suspected. They were too charming, too wealthy, too above suspicion. And they're still out there, according to some accounts. Still feeding, still moving. A husband and wife bound by blood and hunger, hunting together through the centuries. The third account comes from the journal of Father Michael Doyle, a Catholic priest stationed in rural Ireland in 1905. Father Doyle was called to perform a blessing on a family whose daughter, Siobhan, had fallen gravely ill. He writes, "The girl is 16 years old, previously healthy, now wasting away before her family's eyes. She sleeps all day, becomes agitated at dusk, and begs to be let outside at night. Her parents have locked her in her room for her own safety. When I arrived, I found the family exhausted, terrified, They showed me Siobhan's neck. 2 puncture wounds, fresh every morning, though they lock her away alone. Something is visiting this girl at night, feeding on her, and the locked door does nothing to stop it. Father Doyle decided to keep vigil in Siobhan's room that night. He describes sitting in a chair, rosary in hand, as darkness fell. Siobhan slept fitfully, muttering in her sleep. At midnight, Father Doyle writes, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. His breath became visible. And then he heard it. A scratching at the window. Light at first, then more insistent. He looked and saw a man's face pressed against the glass. But they were on the 2nd floor. The face was pale, aristocratic, with eyes that glowed red in the darkness. The man smiled, revealing elongated canine teeth, and spoke though the window was closed. His voice came from everywhere at once. Move aside, priest. The girl is mine. I've been feeding on her for weeks. She's nearly turned. Soon she'll open the window herself and invite me in. You cannot stop what's already begun. Father Doyle responded with prayer, holding up his crucifix. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The figure at the window recoiled, his face contorting with rage and pain. Smoke rose from his skin where moonlight touched it. But he didn't leave. He stayed at that window all night, scratching, whispering, promising Siobhan pleasure if she'd just unlock the window. The girl thrashed in her sleep, crying out for him, begging her father to let him in. Father Doyle had to physically restrain the family from opening the window themselves. So compelling was the creature's voice. Dawn finally came, and the figure vanished with a shriek of frustration. Father Doyle spent the next week researching in old church texts. He found references to creatures called the undead, or Nosferatu, in ancient manuscripts. Beings that had died but refused to stay dead, that sustained themselves on the blood of the living, that could not enter a home without invitation, could not cross running water, feared holy symbols and sunlight. He armed himself with blessed silver, holy water, and wooden stakes. He tracked the creature to an abandoned monastery outside the village. Inside he found a crypt, and in that crypt, lying in a stone coffin, was the creature, asleep but aware. Its eyes opened as Father Doyle approached. It spoke. "You cannot kill me, priest. I have walked this earth for 300 years. I have survived inquisitions, witch hunts, plagues. What makes you think you can end me?" Father Doyle's journal describes what happened next in clinical detail. The struggle, the creature's supernatural strength, the way it moved like smoke and shadow. But Father Doyle had faith and preparation on his side. He drove a stake through the creature's heart, and it shrieked with a sound that shattered the crypt's windows. He severed the head with a blessed blade. The body crumbled to dust instantly, as if centuries caught up with it all at once. In the dust, Father Doyle found bones that carbon dating would later show were over 300 years old. He also found something else, a locket containing a portrait of a woman, young, beautiful. On the back was an inscription, "To my beloved Siobhan, forever yours." The creature had been hunting girls named Siobhan for 3 centuries, trying to replace the one he'd lost. An eternal quest to reclaim a love that death had stolen. Father Doyle saved that village girl, but his journal's final entry haunts readers to this day. "I have destroyed one creature, but I fear there are countless more." In my research, I found references to covens, families, entire lineages of the undead. They hide among us, pretending to be human, feeding carefully to avoid detection. How many unexplained deaths are actually their work? How many missing persons have become their prey? I have devoted my life to God. but now I must devote it to hunting these abominations. If you find this journal and I have not returned, know that I died fighting creatures that should not exist, and know that they are still out there, still hunting, still feeding. Vigilance is our only defense. Faith is our only weapon. Father Doyle disappeared in 1907 while investigating reports of unusual deaths in a neighboring county. His body was never found, but local legends speak of a priest who walks the night, still hunting the creatures he swore to destroy. Some say he became one of them in his final moments. Others say his spirit cannot rest while the undead still prey on the innocent. Either way, his journal survived, and it's one of the most detailed accounts we have of actual combat with these creatures. The fourth account is more recent and perhaps more disturbing because of it. In 2008, a graduate student named Jennifer Torres was researching genealogy in the archives of a Boston library. She was tracing her family history back through centuries of records. What she discovered changed her understanding of her own bloodline forever. She documented her findings in a blog that was taken down shortly after her disappearance, but archived copies still exist. She writes, "I found something impossible in my family records. My great-great-great-grandmother, Lucia Torres, supposedly died in childbirth in 1887, but I found census records showing someone named Lucia Torres living at various addresses from 1890, 1900, 1910, all the way through 1990. Same name, same birth date, same physical description. Over a century of records showing a woman who should have been dead." Jennifer dug deeper. She found photographs. The woman in the 1887 photo looked identical to the woman in photos from 1950, 1980, 2000, hadn't aged a day. Jennifer traced Lucia Torres through over a century of documentation. She'd lived in different cities, used different last names occasionally, but always came back to Lucia Torres. And everywhere Lucia lived, there were reports of mysterious deaths, specifically young women found in their homes, drained of blood, with marks on their necks. Jennifer wrote, "I think my great-great-great-grandmother didn't die in childbirth. I think she became something else, something that's been alive and feeding for over 120 years. And here's the part that terrifies me. She's been following our family line. Every few generations, a young woman in our family disappears or dies under mysterious circumstances. I think Lucia has been selecting descendants, grooming them, turning them into what she is." Jennifer's final blog post, dated October 31st, 2008, reads, "I found her. Lucia Torres is living in Salem, Massachusetts, just 2 hours from where I am. I've seen recent photos. She looks exactly like she did in 1887. I'm going to confront her. I need to know the truth about my family, about myself. I've been having dreams lately. Dreams where a woman who looks like an older version of me stands over my bed, stroking my hair, whispering that it's time, that the bloodline must continue, that I'm chosen. I wake up feeling weak, dizzy. I found marks on my neck this morning. I think she's been visiting me, preparing me. Part of me is terrified, but another part, a part I don't recognize, is eager, hungry, waiting for something I don't understand but somehow crave." Jennifer Torres was reported missing on November the 2nd, 2008. Police investigated but found no evidence of foul play. Her apartment was undisturbed. Her car was still in the parking lot. She simply vanished. But there have been sightings. People who knew Jennifer claim to have seen her in various cities over the past 15 years. She looks exactly the same, hasn't aged, moves with a grace she never had before, and she's always accompanied by an older woman who looks remarkably like her. Lucia Torres and Jennifer Torres, grandmother and great-great-great-granddaughter, reunited across generations, hunting together, feeding together, building a family of the undead that spans centuries. And according to some reports, they're looking for other descendants, other young women in the Torah's bloodline. The family tree is being transformed, branch by branch, into something that doesn't need sunlight to thrive. The fifth and final account connects all these stories because it suggests something more organized than random attacks. In 2019, an investigative journalist named Marcus Webb began researching vampire legends for a book. What he discovered was documented evidence suggesting vampires aren't just real, but organized. He compiled historical records, missing person reports, unexplained deaths, and found patterns that suggested a network, a society. He wrote in his notes, "They're not solitary hunters, they're structured, organized. There are rules they follow, territories they control. They operate like an underground civilization that's existed parallel to human society for thousands of years, and they're getting bolder." Marcus traced bloodlines of suspected vampires across centuries. He found families that never seemed to die out, just moved and changed names periodically. He found businesses that had been owned by the same individuals for impossible lengths of time, with paperwork showing different names but photographs showing identical faces. He found patterns of deaths in cities where these individuals lived. And he found something else, evidence that they were recruiting, that the vampire population was growing deliberately, that they had quotas, methods, selection criteria for choosing who to turn and who to simply drain. Marcus wrote, "This isn't random predation. This is systematic cultivation of a food source. They maintain human population carefully, never taking too many from one area. They've learned to hide in plain sight, to use our systems against us. They hold positions of power in government, finance, medicine. They've infiltrated every level of society, and they're preparing for something." Marcus's research notes become increasingly paranoid toward the end. He writes of being followed, of finding his apartment broken into, though nothing was stolen, of receiving messages warning him to stop his investigation. His final note, dated 3 months before his disappearance, reads, "I've been contacted by one of them. She calls herself the Magistrate, claims to represent their governing body. She says I've learned too much, that I'm endangering their secrecy. She's given me 2 choices. Join them, become one of them, use my journalism skills to help maintain their cover, or die. She's given me 1 week to decide. I'm documenting everything and hiding copies in multiple locations. If I disappear, if this research surfaces after I'm gone, you'll know I chose death over becoming a monster. But here's what terrifies me most. She told me they're winning, that within 50 years, they won't need to hide anymore, that they're positioning themselves to rule openly, that humanity's time as the dominant species is ending, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, because we don't even believe they exist." Marcus Webb disappeared on December 15, 2019. His apartment was found empty, cleaned thoroughly. No blood, no signs of struggle, just gone. His research materials were confiscated by authorities and classified. The official story was that he'd had a mental breakdown and run off. But copies of his research survived, hidden in encrypted files and secret locations. And those of us who've read his work understand the truth. Vampires are real. They're organized. They're growing in number and power. And they're preparing for a future where they don't need to hide in shadows anymore, where they can feed openly on a human population that will be helpless to resist. These 5 accounts, spanning over a century, tell a consistent story. There are creatures among us that look human but aren't. They're predators perfected by centuries of evolution and practice. They've learned our weaknesses, exploited our psychology, infiltrated our institutions. They feed on us in darkness and we forget by daylight. But the evidence remains. The journals, the letters, the documented disappearances, the bodies found drained of blood with marks that shouldn't exist. They're real. They've always been real. And the only reason we don't believe in them is because they've gotten very, very good at making us forget, at convincing us they're just stories, just legends, just fiction. But I'm telling you now, as someone who's compiled these accounts, who's verified the historical records, who's traced the patterns across centuries, they're not fiction, they're fact, and they're hungry. So tonight, when you go to sleep, lock your windows, cover your mirrors, keep a light burning, because somewhere out there, something ancient and hungry is looking for its next meal, and it might just be looking at you. Story inspired by classic Gothic horror and vampire mythology, written by Margaret Blackwood.